Welcome into Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolfe and Gavin Schall here, and we are talking through some unfortunate drama 20 games into the season for your New York Knicks. Quentin Grimes, very unhappy with his role in the starting lineup, feels like he's getting too quick of a hook, feels like he's not involved enough, and we might agree with that a little bit. So we want to talk through that, talk through the overall situation, and then try to come up to a decision of should the Knicks change up the starting lineup? Should they leave things the same? Should they just try to get Grimes more involved? Clearly something that needs to be addressed. So we're going to do it right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And we want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that notification bell on YouTube or the auto download function on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. I'm Alex Wolfe. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, and he is Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And we are talking about Quentin Grimes today, Gavin. The quotes. I'll go through them again. I went through them in the previous episode after the Knicks' horrible loss. It was in the first segment. Let's do it again. Grimes said it's just hard. It's so hard when you go the whole quarter without touching the ball, the whole second quarter without touching the ball. Then you get one shot and you got to make it. So it's tough going out there and just standing in the corner the whole game. Then you got to make the shot when you shoot the ball 1 or 2 times per game. It is what it is. Also said it feels like if I don't hit the shot, I'm coming out. So every shot I shoot probably weighs like 100 pounds if I don't make it. And our defense, it ain't cutting it. So I know I ain't going back in. So I don't know. It's a tough situation, Gavin. This is a team that's been largely drama free for most of this year. And this is very drama full. It's very, I don't know. We'll talk about it more in a sec. Like I'll give some thoughts on this, but it's very not Knicksy to have someone coming out publicly like this and saying stuff like this to the press. This has been a team that largely keeps things played pretty close to the vest, and no matter how unhappy someone is, they don't really say stuff to reporters. So this leads you to believe this feels like a pretty dire situation right now.
Yeah, and there was a really interesting Stephen Bondi piece on this topic today, and he was just kind of going through how this can be a theme on Tom Thibodeau teams, right? And he highlighted like a number of other guys this has happened to. He said, sound familiar? It's because 6 other current or former Knicks players, Josh Hart, Cam Reddish, Obi Toppin, Evan Fournier, Mitchell Robinson, Kemba Walker, all echoed similar, if not the exact same frustrations. So he gets into a lot more, but we can take this step by step. Every NBA team has guys that are frustrated with their touches, that are frustrated with their minutes, right? That is completely normal to some extent. What compounds it for the Knicks is that they have built up a lot of depth, and they built up a lot of depth concentrated at really like 2 positions, right? The point guard and the 2 guard spot, and not so much the 3, because these guys sometimes play the 3, but they largely do not get to play the 3. And like for Josh Hart and RJ Barrett, this is not so much of an issue. But you even look at someone like Emmanuel Quickley, like he's at 3 straight games of playing 19 minutes straight. And for someone who is at times arguably the Knicks' second best player, I would still say pretty undoubtedly their 3rd best player, maybe not with how hot RJ was at the start of the year. That's not great. So is this a front office issue for how they constructed the roster? Is this a Tom Thibodeau issue for him not drawing up enough stuff to get Grimes touches or getting him minutes with the second unit so he gets extra touches? Or is this a Quentin Grimes issue? And I think, like with most of these things, Alex, the truth is somewhere in the middle of all 3 of those things. I think there's a lot more that Quentin Grimes could do to be getting involved with the offense. And that's evidenced by someone like Dante DiVincenzo, who it's a super small sample size, but in the 2 games he started this year has had no issues, right? Is averaging 20 points per game in those 2 starts, is shooting 1,000,000% from 3 in those 2 starts, couple of rebounds, couple of assists. He's a plus 34.5 net rating playing with the starting lineup. Again, that is in just 44 possessions this year. So that is not a super big sample size, but just watching both of them, it's so clear that while Tom Thibodeau's maybe his most basic instruction to those guys is, hey, go sit in the corner, like DiVincenzo maximizes that instruction because he is also speeding in for rebounds. And when a player is driving, you see him moving in sync off the ball to get open and to find a shot. While Grimes just feels like languid, lethargic, whatever L word you want to use for him. It hasn't, like, he is not doing anything to help himself. The driving, which we both were in love with last year and we're hoping he would double down on this year, is just completely gone for his game, except for maybe it's picked up like a tiny bit the last few, but it's still way down from last year. I say all that to say, Alex, like, the truth is undoubtedly in the middle, but I think what's inarguable is the Knicks have a real problem brewing here.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think if I'm looking at this from the simplest way possible, the nuclear option is obviously blow it up, change starting lineup, like get Grimes out of there, throw him on the bench. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing. Like, I think that there are many ways that playing with the bench could be more comfortable for him. I even said, literally, when I released a show earlier today, recapping last night's game, like, maybe it would work out better to just kind of, throw him on the bench with Quickly. They could be more comfortable together. They've kind of grown up together on the Knicks. Let them play together off the bench and move DiVincenzo into the starting lineup where he's more comfortable with Jalen Brunson, his college teammate, like one of his best friends in the whole world, all that stuff. But as the days gone on, I've kind of started to think more along the lines of like, well, this lineup isn't like broken though. Like, this isn't like 2022 to 23 where it was like the starting lineup was literally one of the worst 5-man lineups in the NBA, regardless of number of possessions, and yet was still being thrown out there for, a bazillion possessions and was like one of the most played lineups in the league. Like, this isn't nonsensical. Like, this lineup is still a plus 5.3 net rating in 463 possessions this year. Like, that's not bad at all. That's good. That's very good. Like, of lineups that I did a search on Clean the Glass, and like of lineups that have played at least 300 possessions together this year so far, it's one of the better lineups in the league. Like, I think they're like 5th or 6th or something, which is a pretty high criteria, in possessions total, but still pretty solid. Like, so I just kind of feel like, I mean, if we're talking about maybe the one thing that did work 2 years ago, and especially the thing that worked 3 years ago in the 20 to 21 season, Reggie Bullock and Evan Fournier were heavily featured with Julius Randle in a 2-man game and just getting the ball. Randle would basically start running the ball along the 3-point line and then just do a quick handoff to whichever one of those two guys, take your pick, the two guys that he played with, and then just set a quick pick to catch their man. And then boom, there's an open 3-point shot for a really good 3-point shooter. I don't know why the Knicks don't still do that. It's like one of the easiest plays they could possibly do. And they go to it never, instead just kind of falling into the same things that they always do, where for better or worse, it's like a lot of ISO and, less using screens and stuff like that. But that was just one of their pet plays that's just disappeared under Tibbs for whatever reason. I think my solution, before we get into like the nuclear options, I feel like it behooves the Knicks to try to fix this. Like, just, try to fix what's there, because the bench unit is clearly great as well and plays fantastic together. And it's like, you don't necessarily want to risk messing that up too if you tinker too much. So I think that's kind of where I'm falling right now as far as the Grimes situation, is just try to fix what's already there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't mind the idea of force feeding him. I think the challenge right now for the Knicks is that, and this we'll probably maybe get into this before the show wraps up, because of how the in-season tournament is gone. I mean, their schedule kind of goes nuclear like the next month, as tough as it's been so far, right? Like, they play at Boston on Friday, then they kind of get a 2-game break. Toronto at home, at Utah, and then next few in a row, at Suns, at Clippers, at Lakers, at Nets, Bucks, OKC, Orlando, at Indiana, against Minnesota, right? Like, there's no break in there. There's no game where I think Tibbs is going to be comfortable saying like, all right, let's pivot and let's force feed Grimes. And to be clear, I know that's not what you're saying. I'm saying like you're saying, all right, 5 possessions a game. Can we get him and Randall in action together? 7 possessions a game. Can we get him and Randall in action together? And that might not create more shots for Grimes. It might open up wide open looks for Julius Randle, like rolling to the basket out of that because Grimes gets swarmed because he's still respected as a shooter. All I can say about Quentin Grimes is like we saw what he did over the 10 games last year. We saw what he did the last 15 games of the season, post All-Star break last season, where he was shooting like 45% from 3, averaging 15 points per game, playing awesome defense. We've seen him defend in the crucible of the playoffs. I don't think there are any questions there. We saw what he did like the first couple of games of his career where he was shooting lights out. Like the guy has talent. I think he is just incredibly far in his own head right now. And it's that thing that we always talked about with Obi Toppin, where it is like shooting with a backpack full of bricks on when you have that feeling of like, this is the one shot I'm going to get. I better hit it or I'm not seeing the ball again. So that's a real issue. There's more he could do. There's more the Knicks could do to help him out. And we will continue talking about that. We will talk about what a lineup change would look like, Alex. But first, I want to talk about our good friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Alex, I am looking, as I have for much of the season, at those NBA championship odds. The New Orleans Pelicans are plus 5,500. That game against the Knicks still sticks with me. That team is scary. They are just enormous. They have a lot of shooting, a lot of scoring, a lot of versatility. I'm a big Trey Murphy guy. He just came back. I'm a fan of the Pelicans from afar, or at least a fan of making some money off them. So lay some money on their championship odds if you want a fun long shot bet there. And if you want to do that, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off both the NFL and the NBA season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right. Let's keep talking Quentin Grimes. Alex, how does this go? I think is the best way I can ask you. Like we kind of talked about your ideal scenario, which is finding ways to get him more touches. I love Grimes, so I'm totally down for that. I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world to start DiVincenzo just because he has proven to be such a good fit with Brunson. He's shooting exceptionally well to start this year, maybe unsustainably well, but he's on a heater right now. I think you're fine to ride that as long as you can. And I think Grimes will inherently get more opportunities on the ball to work out these kinks on the bench. And then once he gets into a good rhythm, you can move him back into the starting lineup. But either way, you want to go with that. What do you think actually does happen? And is there a world where, if I'm remembering correctly, it feels like a long time ago, even though it wasn't, my bold prediction from last week's episode was that Quentin Grimes gets dealt before the deadline. Is that looking less bold, or is someone else going to get dealt? Like, how does this actually play out?
Well, I think the first thing that I would do in playing this all out would be to sit him down and give him almost like media training and be like, hey, man, like, that's just not how this team does things. Like, if you have issues, keep it in the locker room. You know, I was saying this to you before the show, like, you look at that list that like Bondi listed out, and like, I agree with most of them, but like Evan Fournier, like, he only starts really saying stuff over this past summer, you know, when it looked like he was going to get dealt, and then just being like, well, if they don't have a role for me, I don't want to play there. But he was also doing it like only in his native tongue. So like he was only doing it to French publications and stuff.
Right.
And then people were translating it. I don't know if he thought that people just didn't know how to translate.
Yeah.
French
So
to
we should
English.
just tell if Quentin Grimes is willing to learn a second language, he can say what he
Then
wants.
he could say whatever he wants, you know,
Yeah.
because then there's no way for anyone to know. But like Cam Reddish, you know, again, it sort of spoke through his agent, you know, it seemed like, and got that word out there, but never said anything himself. Like, was always a good soldier about that. Kemba Walker, who cares? Because his run here was terrible. And like his opinion means very little to me at this point. But like Josh Hart, like what he just said recently, I don't think is on the same level as what Quentin Grimes is saying here, where like Josh Hart was kind of just saying, like, I'm learning how to play a little bit of a different way based off what the team needs of me, but I'm going to do it. Whereas Grimes seems more like, I'm frustrated with what the team wants out of me or is putting forward to me, and I want something different. And so I think that my first thing to him was just, and Obi Toppin, I forgot to mention too, like, for as much as we figured out that situation was really messy by the end, I mean, he never said a peep to the press. And same with Emmanuel Quickly, who we've heard various little, you know, tidbits of like, oh, maybe he's not quite happy with what's going on, but you never hear it out of his mouth. And that's sort of like the beauty of this team, is that they've kept everything very in-house, and that's what's kept them drama-free and very un-Knicks like over the
Yeah.
last couple of years. So like that would be thing one for me, is tell Quentin Grimes, like, don't air this out to the media. I mean, I'll throw that to you first to react to that, but like that's the main thing that's kind of bothering me about this, is like
No.
the Knicks are not having a bad season. I can understand if things were in the toilet, like it was 2022 to 23, and things were looking really bad, to maybe be like, all right, only way to change anything at this point is just to say something. But like all in all, this team is playing pretty darn well at the moment, and like they have a good record. Things are looking up, and like also Grimes, not for nothing, just like in some games it's been justified that he's been getting pulled, because he just doesn't look like he has any confidence right now. And maybe that's because, maybe this is all like a self-fulfilling prophecy thing, but like
Yeah.
again, keep that in house. Like talk to your teammates, talk to your coach. Like
Yeah.
I do take a little bit of exception of handling this the way that he did, by just kind of going out there and throwing it all out there like that.
I'm torn on it because I don't think he said anything like particularly egregious. I don't think he said anything untrue. I guess is what I kind of fall back on. But I do agree that it's a slippery slope, because at some point Emmanuel quickly says like, "Hey, I also have tens of millions of dollars on the line." And unlike Quentin Grimes, like I've proven beyond a doubt that like I deserve to close basketball games. I think almost regardless of the night. And both these guys can come out and say like, "Hey, look how many points we just gave up to the Bucks. Like, you really think the solution is to have us on the floor less? You think the solution is to reward us less with the basketball and like keep us engaged on defense?" Like, I would be in his shoes, incredibly frustrated, incredibly scared that like I think I know how good I am, and no one gets to see that, and it's going to cost me millions and millions and millions of dollars. So I get it, and it was one comment, and I think it'll be handled, and I don't think you're going to hear it from him again. I bet the next time he talks to media, he's going to be like, "Yeah, it was just a bad night. I was frustrated. I shouldn't have said that." And I don't think it'll ultimately be an issue, but I hear you in the sense that like it does crack open the door for like someone like Emmanuel quickly to say something, and then maybe you start having issues. But Julius's like immediate response to it was like, "Yeah, we should probably get him the ball more." So I don't know. I don't think it's going to end up being a big deal, but I see your point that this team thrives on those things never getting out, and it being run almost like a mafia.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, not to make it like that dramatic, but yeah, like just give him the,
I mean, Leon Rose has those vibes. I don't know.
can you just imagine like Leon Rose going up to him, like Tony Soprano going up to like Chris Moltisanti and just like grabbing him by the cheeks and be like, "What are you doing? You're ruining me. You're ruining me. Like, stop talking to the media." Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't take, like, I understand what you're saying too. And I guess like the thing that I would want to know, if any of the reporters could get like intel on this, like I'd be curious if like Ian Begley, who clearly kind of knows some people behind the scenes, not necessarily with the Knicks organization, that have at least a little bit of an ear in there, if he would hear something to the effect of like Grimes has already voiced these frustrations and then felt like this was like the next thing for him. But also maybe he just got asked just the right question about like, well, what's your confidence level like right now? And then it just kind of all came out, which
Yeah.
sometimes that happens too. Like he is only human. Um, I just, again, it turns what was already a bad loss into now something that's going to be a source of drama for like weeks, of being like, well, like hyper analyzing every minute that Grimes is on the court. And like, if you thought the spotlight was on him like before, it's going to be on him even more now. Now
Yeah.
he's made these comments of everybody watching his every movement, being like, oh, what's Grimes up to? Like, oh, did he get enough touches? Like, oh, what's his body language say? Whereas before he could have kind of just handled this quietly in the background. At any rate, if we're talking about what the solution it could potentially be, I mean, you mentioned DiVincenzo. I feel like that is sort of the easy solution right now, to just move him into the starting lineup. Like, as much as I was just saying last segment, like I think if it were me right now, I would try to fix things with Grimes, because he's a guy that you were like reluctant to include in a trade for Donovan Mitchell like a year ago. It's like this guy clearly means something to this front office and to this team. I think it's more worthwhile to try to get him right than to just sort of be like, all right, well, you don't like how things are going, get on the bench. Like, and maybe we'll give you more opportunities there, but like you struggle to get 18 minutes now, like just wait till you're on the bench every game, and you're definitely going to struggle to get 18 minutes now. Like
Yeah.
once that happens. But the numbers do kind of overwhelmingly say, at least in the sample that we have, that the Brunson, DiVincenzo, RJ Randall, Mitch lineup is really good. Like they're plus 34.5 in 44 possessions so far this year, which isn't the biggest sample size you want to see, but is enough to at least say like, yeah, all right, there might be something there. And certainly the eye test bears out of like whether it's that lineup with RJ or that lineup with Hart lately, that lineup has been crushing. And DiVincenzo's been playing that role really well, being active on defense and stuff. So I don't know. It's pretty complicated. I'm curious to see how things are going to go as far as finding the right balance of keeping Grimes's needs at the forefront, but also just doing what's best for the team at the moment too.
Yeah, let me just throw one more quick thing out there before we head to segment 3, because I meant to say this earlier and forgot to. So RJ Barrett, first 7 games of the season, he's at 22 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He's shooting 49% from the floor, 50% from 3, 85% from the line. His last 8 games since coming back from migraines, aka a knee injury. 15 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 35% from the field, 25% from 3. 86% from the line. So when I say I get Grimes's frustrations, like how could he not be watching RJ Barrett right now? How could Emmanuel Quickly not be watching RJ Barrett right now and saying, "Hey, I could do that. Like you give me those shots, I could shoot better than 35% from the field. I could shoot better than 25% from the line." Or not from the line, from 3. And maybe RJ would counter like, all right, you're not getting the free throw line at the same rate. You're not as efficient there. And that's always kind of been the question with Grimes, right? Like could he, like if the Knicks were to give him a bigger load, could he handle him? We have that one post All-Star game stretch, but there have also been moments where like he'll have the ball in his hands and like have the worst defender on the court on him and not be willing to go at that guy. So that's why I say like it also has something to do with Quentin, but I think that's where like frustration starts coming out. Like when everyone is cooking, he can't really say anything. But when RJ's shooting that poorly and him and Quickly just have to sit there and watch that, and just because of the positional breakdown of this team, like I think that's where I come back to. This is always going to be shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic until the Knicks trade one of those guards for a big wing, which inevitably, whether it's before the trade deadline, whether it's this offseason, like it's going to happen at some point. And until it does, like, I think you're just taking turns having guys being frustrated. And this is always going to be a thing. But I do think there's a broader issue here where shots are guaranteed to someone like RJ Barrett because of a product of who he is versus someone like Quentin Grimes. And I don't know how much of that is just that RJ actually will take those shots and Quentin would never take those shots. But that's just something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, and I'll address that in just a sec too, because I brought that up in the recap of the Bucks game as something not necessarily related to Grimes, but like saying if RJ is going to be shooting the percentages that he has been lately, maybe let's reduce the 18 attempts per game, including the amount that he got to take that got him free throws. So like if you include that, he took like 22 shots, I think, in the last game. Maybe let's start cutting that down to like 12 to 15 if he's going to be shooting this way until he starts shooting better. But I'll get to that in just a sec. I just want to remind everybody real quick that today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. And what is PrizePicks? PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're easy to use and the most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. So instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks and whales and all kinds of other aquatic creatures, you pick up more than or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And I think with the basketball season here, the idea of picking combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League is one of the coolest things you could do on PrizePicks. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. So, for example, think LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions. Pretty cool. Although I don't know that I would bet that right now. I have Travis Kelce in fantasy, and he's not getting quite as many receptions, and LeBron maybe wouldn't make that many threes. So maybe don't pick that one, but definitely look for those. Don't pick any overs for the Jets either, or the Giants for that matter. Just terrible way to spend your PrizePicks.
Hey, we have a great quarterback, Alex. Thank you.
And we both do. We both have just absolutely great quarterbacks. Zach Wilson's back. Can't wait. Anyway, PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy. This is one of my other favorite features, so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. And PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Huge, huge. Any form of fantasy, daily or otherwise, having injury insurance is the best possible thing that you can have. So if you want to check out PrizePicks for yourself, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, it's daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, Gavin, and we're back in, continuing talking through this little Quentin Grimes situation we got going on here. And yeah, the RJ Barrett aspect, like, I don't know. I don't know if he would be considered a point of jealousy or contempt or anything for Grimes, or if they consider themselves to be more of like a brotherhood, or if the whole team does. Like, the whole dynamic of this team is getting a little weird to read, because in the past it kind of seemed like everybody was hunky-dory, and especially
Mm.
like last year, everybody seemed very cool with each other. I wonder if maybe some of the reporting, the social media posting, whatever, the general obsession over like the Villanova lineup or whatever, like, I wonder if that does kind of get to these guys a little bit,
Yeah.
like if
Can
it
I
gets.
throw something out there? Do you
Yeah,
think it's as simple as like Grimes and Quickly are up for contract extensions, and like Quickly's is obviously even more imminent than just like the pressure of like, all right, like now, like it was cute when we were young, but like now we need to get paid.
maybe. I mean, I could certainly see it. I think from the perspective of Quickly, like, Quickly's situation, I think, is different than Grimes's, because I still think that
Sure.
Quickly is being given every bit of latitude
Mhm.
that he was before. Like, he's
Yeah, he
still
gets the
being.
ball, right?
Right, yeah, he
Yeah.
still has the ball in his hands a ton, and he's still
Mhm.
being empowered to take whatever shot he wants. But, I mean, unfortunately for him, this is kind of on him at this point. He's just not putting the ball in the hoop right now, and that's
Yeah.
leading to him getting sat down the stretches of games. Like, otherwise, he would be in there for DiVincenzo or something. Like, we've seen that
Mm.
happen this season, like earlier this year. But like, I think that's his situation. Grimes, it's a little different, because it almost feels like I could see we've brought up the same point a number of times, but you could almost see where he would be looking at this and almost thinking like, man, it's almost like this team is like sabotaging my future worth right now, just by virtue of not including me at all. And I just kind of feel like I'm out here to just do the dirty work and get none of the glory on the other end. Like, go out here, defend the other team's best player every single night thanklessly, and then go to the other side and just get looked off all day by Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I hope that this becomes something productive for him. But I certainly hope that there's nothing in terms of him having like contempt for any of his other players on the team, because I do like that this team has tended to have sort of like a brotherhood dynamic to it in the past, and it would be a shame to see that get eroded at all by something like, just someone feeling not included in the offense or whatever, when there's, in my opinion, in your opinion, I think there's easy ways to remedy it,
Yeah.
as far as getting Grimes some more looks quicker. But we also know that we're at the 20 game mark, and that means that Tibbs is going to start looking at things in the next like game or two, if history tells us anything, and potentially make some wholesale changes in the next couple games too. So I guess we'll see how that goes as well.
Yeah, and this is also something you touched on earlier specifically, but I just can't help but think that Tibbs isn't going to want him on the floor in the playoffs with his defense, because the Knicks defense obviously statistically has been awesome this year and substantially improved over last year, but I still think there's a lot of just work that Grimes does every single game that just goes underappreciated by most people watching. And I'm not putting myself above that. Like it goes underappreciated by me vast majority of games, because you're just not watching him like fight through a screen, like especially off the ball, right? Unless you're doing the Tibbs thing and watching the game 3 times back, Alex. And not that DiVincenzo is a poor defender, like he's actually more of a playmaker. Like Benji did a really good job on Knicks Film School breaking this down recently. Like he's more of a playmaker. He's not the one-on-one defender that Grimes is, and you might have a solution on one end, and fall off on another. And like what's made the Knicks so promising this year is that they've hovered around a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense in the NBA, which, as we talk about, is kind of the most basic metric for a championship contender. Do I think the Knicks are actually that good? No, but that's like some of that has to be credited to Grimes, even if you credit more of it to Mitchell Robinson. Sure, you should experiment, you should mess around. I just think he is someone, unless they trade him and replace him with someone who does similar things more consistently, like you are going to need this guy at some point this year. So you better figure it out and you better figure out a way to empower him. But again, I fall back on, like, at the end of the day, and this was kind of the point of the Bondi article, and maybe we could finish up here, Alex. Like, the Knicks knew what they were doing when they functionally traded Obi for DiVincenzo. And I don't think any of us regret, even as well as Obi's been playing the last few games. He's been awesome. I don't think any of us regret the Knicks doing that, because Obi was literally never going to have a bigger role in any capacity. And this gives the Knicks so much flexibility. And I think we've seen how it's benefited them with being able to pick and choose who's closing games and always have someone who's having a good night at the end of a game. But it's also destined to self-destruct, because all these guys have grander ambitions. And especially when DiVincenzo is the one who's playing well, who's the one of the group who should have the least ambitions and who's already gotten paid. Like, I just don't see how this ends with starting next season with both Quickley and Grimes on this team, which is a bummer, because I thought at one point that was maybe your future backcourt for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, I mean, I do definitely. I think without a doubt, and to bring it back to the trade thing, I don't think the Knicks are necessarily going to take these comments and be like, "Well, get him on the first train out of here."
No.
I don't think that's going to happen. But I think it's more than likely that Grimes is now sort of being cemented as like one of the guys that will for sure be included in a trade package if/when they make that move to sort of consolidate this roster down a little bit. That said, though, yeah, they have sort of painted themselves in a corner in a little bit of a way. But I mean, you and I were just talking like a week ago about like, oh, maybe they, if they get an opportunity to go after Bojan Bogdanovic, maybe do it, or if they get a chance to go after like more talent, bring more talent in and consolidate, Evan Fournier and like a first round pick, one of your protected ones, down to just getting more talent on this team. Because I think ultimately talent wins, and it's kind of just like up to the coach and the front office to interact with these players and just at least make sure that they feel valued in whatever way that they can. And it's clear that Grimes doesn't feel that right now. So I don't think it would take a ton to change that. And I'll just kind of go back to that. It's sort of just my thesis for this whole thing. Like, if you just design like 4 or 5 plays a game for him, which would not be that hard, and they can even just be things that still feature Julius Randle, like, kind of stirring the drink and getting things going. I think that might be more than enough to make him feel like he's being more included on offense and not feel like the weight of the world is on his shoulders, especially if like you work in, hey, let's get Grimes. Remember how they used to always, I mean, I've talked about this a bunch. Remember how they used to always, almost like clockwork, first play or two of every single game, it was that like pistol action of RJ up top, run that screen with Mitchell Robinson. RJ drives, gets the option of toss a lob to Mitch or go up with a layup yourself. Just a little something to be like, hey, this is for you, and like, this is for you. I don't care if you make it or miss it, but like, do it, work in the reps, get some good playing time. Just figure out something like that for Grimes. Just do like 2 of those little dribble handoffs by Randle and try to free him up for a movement 3 up top and just see how it goes for a couple games. And
I think Bondi's whole point here is that Tom Thibodeau doesn't think about that. And like, and to your point, like, he seems to occasionally with RJ Barrett, but if it's not one of the big 3 guys, like, does he care? Does he think? Does he in his heart of hearts believe that Quentin Grimes being a little bit more happy and a little bit more taken care of affects winning? And like Bondi says in that article, like, he's a great coach, but like a terrible communicator. And I don't know. I think maybe he's closer to the aggregate in both those things, but I hear what he's saying. And that's what really killed him in Minnesota. I mean, I think that wore out his welcome a little bit in Chicago. Like, this has clearly always been a weakness for him. And like, I'm sure the assistants, like, I'm sure like Johnny Bryant, I think, is on staff, like, obviously because he's a brilliant tactician and he's clearly like a genius player developer, but also partially because like he can be that guy for some of these players. But at a certain point, it has to come from Tibbs. And I wonder, and Tibbs, we should note, loves Grimes. Like, there's a reason like he hasn't been pulled out of the starting lineup, right? Like, Tom Thibodeau is a Quentin Grimes fan, but can he help him now? is sort of my question.
Yeah, I agree with you right there. And I guess we'll just be able to see when they play the Celtics in their next game. If, when they get quote unquote rewarded for making the in-season tournament by getting another game against the freaking Boston
another
Celtics.
Conversation. Yeah.
A whole separate
real
thing.
fast, Alex. That stat from Tommy Beer, because I mentioned this to you before the show. With everything, the Knicks play 14 out of their 82 games, or 17% of their games on the season, against the Bucks, Celtics, or Sixers, which are the three teams over the last calendar year that have won the most games in the NBA. So thank you, NBA, for your award. We really appreciate it. That's awesome.
Thanks in-season tournament for making the Knicks' lives a lot harder this season and having them have to face really hard opponents all the time, including the title favorite 10 times. Or the title favorites, I should say, out of the East 10 times this year. So sweet. Anyway, the Knicks will get to potentially work things out with Quentin Grimes then. Maybe they've had some long team discussions since then. We don't know. I guess we'll see when the quotes start coming out on after that Celtics game, how things are going. But until then, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.